The gunshot that shattered the morning quiet wasn't meant for Helena Harper, but it changed her life all the same. She stood at the window of the small room above the general store in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma Territory, watching as dust kicked up from the hooves of a black stallion. The rider dismounted with fluid grace, his silhouette framed against the harsh August sun of 1891. Helena pressed her palm against the glass, feeling the heat radiating through it, much like the fever that had been building in her chest for months now. A fever born of desperation and dreams of freedom that seemed impossibly far away. Behind her, she heard the heavy footsteps of Marcus Dalton climbing the stairs. Her stomach clenched. He would want to know why breakfast wasn't ready, why his shirt wasn't pressed, why she wasn't smiling the way a proper wife should. Except she wasn't his wife yet, though the arrangement had been made 2 years ago when she was 18, and her father owed more money than their failing ranch could ever repay. "Helena," Marcus called through the door, his voice carrying that edge of impatience she had come to dread. "We have business to discuss." She turned from the window, smoothing her faded blue dress, and opened the door. Marcus stood there, his bulk filling the doorway, his face red from the climb and probably from the whiskey he'd been drinking since dawn. At 42, he was more than twice her age, his belly straining against his vest, his eyes cold as creek water in January. "The preacher arrives next Tuesday," he said without preamble. "We'll be married Wednesday morning. Your father's debt will be settled, and you'll finally start earning your keep properly." Helena's throat tightened. "That's only 5 days away. You've had 2 years to get used to the idea." Marcus stepped closer, and she caught the sour smell of alcohol and tobacco. "Most women would be grateful. I'm giving you a home, a position in this town. Your father would be rotting in jail if not for my generosity." Generosity. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. He had bought her father's debt from the bank and held it over both their heads like a noose. Her father, broken by grief after her mother's death and weakened by years of hard drinking, had signed her away without meeting her eyes. He died 6 months later, leaving her truly alone with an obligation she never chose. "I understand," she said quietly, because what else could she say? Marcus reached out and gripped her chin, tilting her face toward the light. His fingers were rough, possessive. "You're pretty enough, I suppose, could smile more. My first wife knew how to make a man feel welcome in his own home." Helena pulled away gently. "I should start on that breakfast." He let her go, and she hurried down the stairs to the small kitchen attached to the general store Marcus owned. It was a profitable business, the only general store for miles, which gave him considerable influence in Oklahoma City. The territory was still rough, still finding its shape, and men like Marcus Dalton carved out their little kingdoms wherever they could. She was cracking eggs into a pan when she heard the bell above the store's front door jingle. Marcus's heavy tread moved from the stairs toward the shop, and she heard another voice, deeper, with a drawl that carried the dust of long trails and open spaces. "Looking for supplies," the stranger said. "Coffee, beans, salt pork, flour, whatever's fresh." "Got everything you need," Marcus replied, his tone shifting to the false friendliness he used with customers. "Passing through, depends." "On what?" "On whether there's honest work to be found." Helena moved closer to the doorway, staying out of sight but listening. Something in that voice pulled at her, a quality she couldn't name. "Work's scarce unless you've got particular skills," Marcus said. "What's your trade?" "Horses mostly. Breaking, training, breeding. Can handle cattle too. Did some smithing work in Texas." "Texas man, are you? Born there?" "But I've been north to Montana, west to California. Wherever the work is." Helena risked a glance around the doorframe. The stranger stood with his back to her, tall and lean, his clothes dusty from travel. Dark hair curled at his collar beneath a worn hat. His gun belt sat easy on his hips, the holster tied down in a way that suggested he knew how to use it. "Name's Gideon Anderson," he said. "And you are Marcus Dalton. I own this store and a fair bit of property around here." The pride in Marcus's voice made Helena's jaw tighten. "There's a ranch about 10 miles north might need help. Old Tom Brennan's place. His son moved east and Tom's getting too old to handle it alone. Much obliged for the information." Gideon moved along the counter, selecting items. "How long's this town been here?" "Oklahoma City's been official since '89 when they opened the territory for settlement. Land run brought thousands. Most moved on, but those of us with sense stayed and built something lasting." Marcus rang up the purchases. "You thinking of settling?" "Like I said, depends." Their transaction completed, Helena heard the door open and close. She returned to the stove, flipping the eggs with more force than necessary. The stranger's voice lingered in her mind. There had been something in it, a kind of freedom that she ached for with every fiber of her being. Tuesday arrived too quickly. Helena stood in the small church, her dress pressed and clean, while the preacher, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles, discussed the ceremony with Marcus. Wednesday morning seemed to rush toward her like a runaway horse, and she felt powerless to stop it. That afternoon, Marcus sent her to deliver a repaired saddle to Tom Brennan's ranch. She suspected it was a test, to see if she would run. Where would she go? She had no money, no family, no friends who could help her without risking Marcus's wrath. The territory was harsh and unforgiving to women alone. She hitched the wagon and set out, grateful at least for the temporary freedom of the open road. The sky stretched vast and blue above her, and for a moment she let herself imagine just keeping going, following the horizon until Oklahoma City was nothing but a memory. Tom Brennan's ranch appeared as a cluster of weathered buildings against the golden grass. As she approached, she saw two figures in the corral, a stout older man and a taller, younger one working with a skittish mare. Her heart jumped. Even from a distance, she recognized Gideon Anderson's lean form. She pulled the wagon to a stop near the house, and Tom Brennan looked up, wiping sweat from his brow. "Miss Helena," he called. "That my saddle?" "Yes, sir. Marcus said it's all repaired." "Good, good. Come meet my new hand, best horseman I've seen in years." Tom walked over while Gideon continued working with the mare, speaking to her in low, soothing tones. "Gideon, got someone for you to meet." Gideon turned, and Helena saw his face clearly for the first time. He was perhaps 24 or 25, with strong features weathered by sun and wind. But it was his eyes that caught her, a startling green that seemed to see straight through her careful composure. When he looked at her, something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition though they'd never been introduced. "Madam," he said, removing his hat. His dark hair was damp with sweat, curling slightly at the ends. "This is Helena Harper," Tom said. "She's engaged to Marcus Dalton, getting married tomorrow." "Day after tomorrow," Helena corrected automatically, then wondered why it mattered. "Wednesday then," Tom agreed. "Gideon just hired on yesterday. Came recommended by a rancher in Texas I know." "Congratulations on your upcoming marriage," Gideon said, his voice neutral, but his eyes remained on hers a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," she managed. The word felt like a lie. Tom unloaded the saddle, chatting about the weather and the mare Gideon was training. Helena should have left immediately, but she found herself lingering, watching as Gideon returned to the corral. He moved with a confidence that wasn't arrogance, each gesture deliberate and calm. The mare, who had been tossing her head and stamping nervously, gradually settled under his attention. "He's got a gift," Tom said, following her gaze. "Shame he won't be here long enough to train all my horses. Why is he leaving?" Didn't say so exactly, but men like that rarely stay put. Too much horizon in their blood. Tom squinted at her. "You all right, Miss Helena? You look pale." "Just the heat," she said quickly. "I should get back." As she climbed into the wagon, Gideon called out, "Safe travels, madam." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and urged the horse forward. But as the wagon rolled away, she couldn't stop herself from glancing back. Gideon stood at the corral fence, watching her leave, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. That night, Helena couldn't sleep. She lay in the small room above the store, listening to Marcus snoring in his room down the hall, and felt the walls closing in. Wednesday loomed like a cliff edge, and she was being pushed steadily toward it. Once she married Marcus, there would be no escape. She would be his property in every way that mattered, bound by law and custom to obey, to submit, to slowly disappear until nothing of Helena Harper remained. She rose before dawn and dressed quietly. If this was her last day of freedom, she would spend it outside these walls. She left a note saying she'd gone to pick wildflowers for the ceremony and slipped out into the pre-dawn darkness. Her feet carried her north without conscious decision, following the road toward Brennan's ranch. The sky lightened gradually, painting the clouds in shades of rose and gold. She walked until the town disappeared behind her, until there was nothing but grass and sky and the distant call of meadowlarks greeting the day. She was perhaps halfway to the ranch when she heard hoofbeats behind her. Her stomach dropped. Marcus must have discovered her absence. But when she turned, she saw Gideon Anderson riding toward her on his black stallion. He slowed as he approached, his expression concerned. "Little early for a walk, Miss Harper. I couldn't sleep." It wasn't a lie. He dismounted, leading his horse alongside as they walked together. "Tom sent me to check the fence line. Thought some of it might need repair after last week's storm." They walked in silence for a moment. The morning was cool, the heat of the day still hours away. Helena felt she should say something, but words seemed inadequate. "You don't want to marry him," Gideon said quietly. It wasn't a question. Helena stopped walking. "I don't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice." "Do they?" She turned to face him, 2 years of frustration suddenly spilling out. "My father owed Marcus money. When he died, the debt became mine. If I don't marry Marcus, he'll have me arrested for fraud. Even if I could prove that's not legal, I'd have nothing. No money, no home, nowhere to go. So tell me, what choice do I have?" Gideon was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "How much does he claim you owe?" $200. "That's all. That's a fortune for someone with nothing." Helena wrapped her arms around herself. "I shouldn't be telling you this. I should go back." "Wait." Gideon caught her arm gently. "What if there was another way?" "There isn't. Hear me out." He stepped closer, his green eyes intense. "I've got money saved. Not a fortune, but enough. What if I paid your debt?" Helena stared at him. "You don't even know me. Why would you do that?" "Because I've seen that look in your eyes before. My mother had it, trapped in a marriage that was killing her spirit inch by inch. She died when I was 12, and I always wondered if things could have been different if someone had helped her." He released her arm but didn't step back. "And because from the moment I saw you yesterday, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "That's impossible." "Is it? You feel it too. I can see it in your face." She wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come because he was right. Something had sparked between them, immediate and undeniable. "Even if you paid Marcus, he wouldn't just let me go. He's been planning this marriage for 2 years, and people would talk. They'd say terrible things. Let them talk. We'd be gone before they could say much." Gideon's hand moved to cup her cheek, his touch gentle. "I know this is sudden. I know I'm asking you to trust a stranger. But I'm offering you a choice you said you didn't have. Come with me. We'll leave this morning right now. I'll pay your debt and we'll head west. I've got work waiting in Colorado. We can make a fresh start. You're talking about running away. I'm talking about leaving. There's a difference. Helena closed her eyes. Every practical thought screamed that this was madness. She'd known this man for less than a day. He could be lying about everything. He could be worse than Marcus. But when she opened her eyes and met his gaze, she saw sincerity there and something else. Hope, possibility. The kind of future she'd stopped letting herself imagine. If we do this, she said slowly, Marcus will come after us. He won't let the insult stand. Then we'll deal with it, together. Gideon's thumb brushed her cheekbone. I won't force you, Helena. If you want to go back and marry him, I'll escort you to town and never speak of this again. But if you want to be free, I'm offering you that chance. The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across the grass. Wednesday would begin in a few hours, and with it, the ceremony that would seal her fate, unless she chose differently right now in this moment. I need to go back to town, she said, and watched disappointment flicker across Gideon's face. But not to marry Marcus. There's a letter I wrote to my mother before she died. It's hidden in my room and I can't leave it behind. And I should face Marcus, tell him I'm paying the debt and leaving. Too dangerous. He might try to stop you. He can try. Helena felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Courage, perhaps, or simply the reckless freedom of someone with nothing left to lose. But he won't succeed. I'm done being afraid of him. Gideon studied her face, then nodded. All right, but I'm coming with you. They rode back to town on his stallion, Helena seated in front of him, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. It was improper, but she was past caring about propriety. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her back, and it calmed her racing thoughts. Oklahoma City was stirring to life as they arrived. A few early risers stared at them, and Helena knew the gossip would start immediately. It didn't matter. After today, she'd never see these people again. Gideon tied his horse outside the general store. I'll come in with you. No. This is something I need to do myself. She touched his hand briefly. Wait here. If you hear shouting, then you can come in. She climbed the stairs to her room, her legs steadier than she expected. She found the letter tucked behind a loose board near her bed, her mother's rosary wrapped around it. She held them both for a moment, pressing them to her chest. I'm going to be all right, Mama, she whispered. I'm going to be free. She descended to find Marcus in the kitchen, drinking coffee. He looked up with a scowl. Where the hell have you been? Walking. Helena stayed near the doorway. Marcus, I'm not going to marry you. His face reddened. What did you say? I'm leaving. Today. I'll pay back the debt, every cent, but I won't marry you. Marcus stood, his chair scraping loudly. You ungrateful little fool. You think you can just walk away. I own you. You don't. You never did. Your father signed papers. My father's dead, and those papers aren't worth anything. You've been using that debt to control me, but it ends now. Marcus moved toward her, his bulk menacing in the small space. You're not going anywhere. We're getting married tomorrow, and then you'll learn your place. No, Helena held her ground. I'm done, Marcus. Find someone else to bully. He lunged forward and grabbed her wrist, his grip bruising. You don't get to decide this. The shop door slammed open and Gideon appeared, his hand resting on his gun. Let her go. Marcus's eyes narrowed. This is none of your concern, stranger. She's making it my concern. Gideon's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Release her, now. For a long moment, Marcus didn't move. Then he shoved Helena away and she stumbled against the wall. You're behind this, he snarled at Gideon, filling her head with nonsense. I'm behind nothing. The lady made her own choice. Gideon moved to Helena's side. How much for the debt? $200 plus interest. Call it $250. Fine. Gideon reached into his vest and pulled out a roll of bills. He counted out the money and dropped it on the table. That settles it. Marcus stared at the money, then at them. You think this is over? You think you can embarrass me in my own town and just ride off? I think you can take the money and consider yourself lucky, Gideon said. Or you can make this difficult, and I promise you won't like how that turns out. There was something in Gideon's eyes that made Marcus step back. For all his bluster, Marcus was a bully who preyed on those weaker than himself. Faced with a man who wouldn't back down, he deflated. Get out, he said finally. Both of you, and don't come back. Helena didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed a small bag from her room, stuffing in her few possessions, and followed Gideon out into the morning sunlight. Her heart was pounding, but she felt lighter than she had in years. They stopped at the bank, where Gideon withdrew more money, and at the general store across the street, which was owned by Marcus's competitor, where they bought additional supplies. By mid-morning, they were ready to leave. Helena looked back at Oklahoma City one last time as they rode out. She felt no regret, only relief and a growing sense of anticipation. Whatever lay ahead couldn't be worse than what she was leaving behind. They rode west, following trails that Gideon knew from his travels. He set a steady pace, not pushing too hard but putting distance between them and the town. They stopped at midday to water the horses and eat some of the bread and cheese they'd purchased. How are you holding up? Gideon asked, studying her face. Better than I expected. Helena took a drink from the canteen. I keep waiting to feel afraid, but I just feel free. You were brave back there. I was terrified. That's what courage is, being afraid but doing it anyway. He smiled, and it transformed his face, softening the hard lines travel had etched. For what it's worth, I'm glad you chose to come with me. So am I. Helena met his eyes. Though I realize I'm traveling with a man I barely know. Tell me about yourself, Gideon Anderson. He leaned back against a rock, his hat tilted to shade his face. Not much to tell. Born in Texas, like I said. My father died in the war, never knew him. Mama remarried a man who turned mean when he drank, which was most days. When she died, I left. Been working ranches and breaking horses ever since. Saved most of what I earned because I never had anywhere to spend it. No family left, a sister in Kansas. Haven't seen her in 5 years. We write sometimes. He picked at a blade of grass. Mostly I've been alone, didn't mind it until recently. What changed? Met a woman in a general store who looked like she was drowning and I wanted to help. His green eyes found hers. Haven't been able to stop thinking about her since. Helena felt heat rise in her cheeks. Gideon, what are we doing? Where is this going? Where do you want it to go? She considered the question seriously. I want honesty, I want kindness, I want to feel like a person, not property. Beyond that, I don't know. That seems like a good place to start. He stood and offered his hand. Come on, we should cover more ground before dark. They rode through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing from the flat grasslands around Oklahoma City to more rolling terrain. Gideon pointed out landmarks, telling her stories about his travels. He'd been to places Helena had only read about, seen mountains and oceans and cities that seemed like fairy tales. Will you tell me about Colorado? She asked as the sun began to set. It's beautiful. Mountains so tall they scrape the sky, covered in snow even in summer. Air so clean and thin it makes you dizzy at first. I worked a ranch there 3 years ago, up in the high country. The owner offered me a job again if I ever came back. Is that where we're going, if you're willing? It's a long journey, maybe 3 weeks of hard riding. We'd go through Kansas, possibly need to skirt around some rough territory. But once we get there, there's good work and good land. A person could build a life. A life. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility. Helena wondered what kind of life she could build with this stranger who had offered her freedom. They made camp that night beside a small creek. Gideon caught fish while Helena gathered firewood, falling into an easy division of labor. As darkness fell and stars emerged overhead, they sat by the fire eating the fish and the last of the bread. "Can I ask you something?" Helena said, watching the flames dance. "Anything. Why did you really help me? The truth." Gideon was quiet for a long moment. "The truth is complicated. Part of it was what I said about my mother. Part of it was that I saw myself in you, trapped in a life you didn't choose. And part of it was that when I looked at you, something just clicked into place. Like I'd been walking around missing something I didn't know I needed, and suddenly there it was." "That's how I felt too," Helena admitted softly. "It scared me, still scare you, a little, but not in a bad way." She looked up at the stars, so bright out here away from town. "I've never done anything like this, never been impulsive or reckless. I always did what I was supposed to do, what people expected, and where did it get me? Sometimes the safe path is the most dangerous one." Gideon added wood to the fire. "We should sleep. Long day tomorrow." He had brought 2 bedrolls and he laid them out on opposite sides of the fire. Helena appreciated the gesture, the respect it showed. As she settled into her blanket, listening to the creek and the distant call of a coyote, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: peace. The next few days fell into a pattern. They rose with the sun, rode until midday, rested during the hottest hours, then continued until dusk. Gideon was an easy companion, pointing out wildlife, teaching her about tracking and reading the land. He treated her with unfailing courtesy, but there was an undercurrent of attraction that grew stronger each day. Helena caught herself watching him, the way he moved with unconscious grace, the gentleness in his hands when he tended the horses, the sound of his laugh when she said something that amused him. And she saw him watching her too, his green eyes following her with an intensity that made her breath catch. On the 4th night, they camped near an abandoned homestead, the skeleton of a house offering some shelter from the wind. As they sat by the fire after dinner, Gideon pulled out a harmonica and played softly. The melody was haunting and beautiful, speaking of loneliness and longing. "That's lovely," Helena said when he finished. "Where did you learn to play?" "My mother taught me." It was one of the few things she kept from her life before she married. He turned the harmonica over in his hands. "She used to say music was freedom you could carry with you." She sounds like she was a wise woman. She was, just worn down by life. He looked up at Helena. "I'm glad you didn't let that happen to you. I would have, if not for you. No, you would have found a way eventually. I just happened to be there at the right moment." Helena moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. "Gideon, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Have you ever been in love?" He met her eyes steadily. "No, came close once, a girl in Montana, but she was promised to someone else and I was moving on. Never let myself get attached after that. Seemed easier that way. And now I'm finding that easy isn't always better." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I'm finding that some things are worth the risk." Helena's heart raced. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "I'm afraid of this." "Of what?" "Of how you make me feel. It's too much, too fast. We don't have to rush anything." His voice was gentle. "We've got time to figure this out." But when she opened her eyes and saw the way he was looking at her, time seemed like the one thing they didn't have. The feelings building between them were too strong, too urgent. She leaned forward, closing the distance, and kissed him. Gideon froze for a heartbeat, then his arms came around her, pulling her close. The kiss deepened, months of loneliness and longing pouring out from both of them. His hand tangled in her hair and she gripped his shirt, dizzy with sensation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "Helena, don't apologize," she whispered. "Don't tell me that was a mistake. I wasn't going to. I was going to say we should probably slow down." "Why?" "Because I want to do this right. You just escaped one man who didn't respect you. I won't be another." Helena pulled back enough to look at him. "What if I don't want to slow down? What if I'm tired of being careful?" "Then I'm going to remind you that we've known each other less than a week, and you deserve better than a hasty decision made by firelight." His words were sensible, but they kindled something stubborn in her chest. "And if I said, I've never been more certain of anything, I'd say you're exhausted and emotional and not thinking clearly." He cupped her face in both hands. "I want you, Helena. God, I want you. But I also respect you, and I'm not going to take advantage of this situation. When we're together, really together, it's going to be because we both chose it with clear heads and full hearts." "All right," she wanted to argue, but the sincerity in his eyes stopped her. He was right, frustrating as it was. "All right," she agreed. "But for the record, I think you're too honorable for your own good," he laughed. "That's a complaint I've never heard before." They stayed up talking long into the night, feeding the fire and learning each other's stories. Helena told him about her mother, about growing up on a struggling ranch, about the dreams she'd once had of seeing the ocean. Gideon shared memories of his travels, the beauty and hardship of life on the trail, the people he'd met and places he'd seen. "What do you want, Gideon?" she asked as the fire burned low. "When you imagine your future, what does it look like?" He was quiet for a moment. "A piece of land. Not a big spread, just enough for horses and maybe some cattle. A house I built with my own hands, someone to share it with." He glanced at her. "That probably sounds simple." "It sounds perfect. What about you? What do you want?" Helena thought about it. "Freedom to choose, to wake up each morning and decide what I want to do with the day, to feel safe, to be loved for who I am, not what I can provide." She smiled. "And maybe to see those mountains you told me about. I'll make sure you see them." They crossed into Kansas on the 6th day, stopping at a small town to resupply. While Gideon talked with the general store owner, Helena waited outside, watching the town's activity. A woman about her age walked past, a baby on her hip and a toddler clinging to her skirt. She looked tired but content, and Helena felt a strange pang. Was that what she wanted? The ordinary life of marriage and children? The question seemed premature, given she'd known Gideon less than a week. But she couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, they camped beside a river and Gideon taught her to fish. She was terrible at it, tangling the line and losing the bait, but he was patient, showing her again and again until she finally caught a small trout. "I did it," she exclaimed, holding up the fish triumphantly. Gideon grinned. "You're a natural." "I'm terrible and you know it. You're learning. That's what matters." He helped her remove the hook. "My mother used to say the best part of anything new is the stumbling around at the beginning. That's when you really figure out what you're made of." They cooked the fish along with a can of beans, eating as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple. Helena felt something settling in her chest, a kind of happiness she'd almost forgotten existed. She looked across the fire at Gideon, his face relaxed in the fading light, and thought about how much her life had changed in just a week. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her watching. "That I'm grateful for all of this, even the terrible fishing." "Especially the terrible fishing," she smiled. "Gideon, can I ask you something? Always. What happens when we get to Colorado? What's the plan?" He set down his plate. "I'll take the job at the ranch if it's still available. There's a town nearby, Evergreen, up in the mountains. We could find you a room there, somewhere safe. I'd work and save money, and we'd figure things out from there." "Separate rooms," Helena said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, until and unless you decide you want otherwise." He met her eyes. "I know what people will assume. Woman traveling with a man not married. But what they think doesn't matter. What matters is what's true between us." "And what is true between us?" Gideon leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "That I'm falling in love with you, and I think you might be falling for me too. That we're taking this one day at a time, no promises we're not ready to make. That we're building something honest and real. That's enough for now." Helena's breath caught. "You're falling in love with me. Is that so surprising? I just didn't expect you to say it." "Would you rather I hadn't?" "No," she shook her head. "No, I'm glad you did, because I'm falling too, and it's terrifying and wonderful at the same time. That's how it should feel, I think," he smiled. "Love shouldn't be comfortable and safe. It should shake you up, make you see the world differently." They talked until the stars came out, thick and bright overhead. When they finally settled into their bedrolls, Helena lay awake for a long time, thinking about the future. For the first time in years, that future looked bright. The next few days passed in a haze of long miles and deepening connection. They rode through Kansas, passing farms and small towns, staying to themselves. Gideon was teaching her to ride better, and she was gaining confidence in the saddle. He'd bought her a gentle mare in the last town, and having her own horse made her feel more independent. One afternoon, they stopped at a creek to water the horses, and Gideon suddenly tensed, his hand moving to his gun. "What is it?" Helena asked quietly. "Riders. Coming fast." Helena's stomach dropped. "Marcus? Don't know. Get behind those rocks." She led her mare to cover while Gideon stayed visible, his hand resting on his gun. 3 men appeared over the rise, riding hard. They slowed when they saw Gideon approaching cautiously. "Help you gentlemen." Gideon called. The lead rider, a man with a gray beard and a marshal's star, reined in. "Looking for a couple. Man and woman traveling together. Been some questions raised about them in Oklahoma City." Helena's blood ran cold, but Gideon's expression didn't change. "What kind of questions?" "Woman might have been taken against her will. Man she was supposed to marry filed a complaint." "Did he mention she paid off her debt before leaving? Or that she chose to go?" The marshal's eyes narrowed. "You know something about this?" "I know Marcus Dalton is a bully who doesn't like being told no." Gideon's voice was steady. "The lady paid what she owed and left of her own free will. No crime in that." "That true, miss?" The marshal called toward the rocks. Helena stepped out, her chin lifted. "Yes, sir. Marcus Dalton and I were engaged, but I chose not to marry him. A debt my father owed was paid in full. I left voluntarily." The marshal studied them both. "You folks married?" "Not yet," Gideon said. "Planning to be." "That's between us and none of your concern," Helena said, surprising herself with her boldness. One of the other riders chuckled. "She's got spirit, Sam." The marshal rubbed his jaw. "Marcus Dalton claims the debt wasn't satisfied, that you stole money from him." "That's a lie," Helena said. "Gideon paid him $250. There were no witnesses, but the money was paid. Dalton says different. Says you both should come back and sort this out proper." "We're not going back," Gideon said firmly. "If Dalton has a legal claim, he can pursue it through the courts." "But you're a long way from Oklahoma City, Marshal. This isn't your jurisdiction." "I'm a federal marshal. Everywhere's my jurisdiction." "Then you'll know you can't detain someone without evidence of a crime." Gideon's hand hadn't moved from his gun. "We've committed no crime. We're free citizens traveling through public territory." The tension stretched out. Helena could see the marshal weighing his options, could see the other 2 riders watching, hands near their weapons. Finally, the marshal nodded slowly. "I suppose that's true. But Dalton's got friends, and he's not going to let this drop. You 2 would be smart to watch your backs." "We will," Gideon said. The marshal tipped his hat to Helena. "Madam, hope you know what you're doing." I do, she said firmly. The three men rode off, and Helena released the breath she'd been holding. Gideon turned to her, his expression tight. We need to move faster, he said. Dalton's not going to stop with a marshal. He'll send someone else. Bounty hunters, maybe. Or just men willing to rough us up to save his pride. Gideon began saddling the horses with quick efficiency. From now on, we avoid towns where we can. Travel harder, rest less. I'm sorry, Helena. I thought paying him off would be enough. It's not your fault. She helped with the packing. I knew Marcus wouldn't let this go easily. They rode until well after dark, stopping only when the horses were too tired to continue safely. Gideon set no fire, and they ate cold food, staying quiet and watchful. Are you afraid? Helena asked as they huddled together for warmth, the night air cold, cautious. There's a difference. Have you been in situations like this before? Few times. I've crossed some mean people in my travels. He adjusted his gun belt. I can handle trouble when it comes. I don't want you getting hurt because of me. Hey. He turned to face her, his hand cupping her cheek. I chose this. Nobody forced me, and I'd choose it again in a heartbeat. She kissed him then, quick and fierce. We'll get through this. Damn right we will. The next week was tense. They pushed hard, keeping to less traveled routes. Gideon was constantly alert, checking their back trail, listening for pursuit. Helena found herself jumping at shadows, but Gideon's steady presence kept her grounded. They crossed into Colorado territory on a gray afternoon, rain threatening from heavy clouds. The landscape began to change, the flat plains giving way to rolling foothills. In the distance, Helena could see the mountains Gideon had described, their peaks white with snow even in late summer. We're close now, Gideon said. 2, maybe 3 more days to Evergreen. That night, they found shelter in an abandoned line shack, grateful to be out of the rain that had started to fall. Gideon got a small fire going in the old stove while Helena spread their damp bedrolls to dry. Tell me about the ranch, she said. The one where you'll work. It's called the Avalanche Ranch, runs about 2,000 head of cattle. The owner, Jacob Sterling, is a good man. Fair, pays decent wages. The work's hard, especially in winter, but honest. He stirred the fire. I could save enough in a year, maybe 2, to buy my own land. And then I build that house I told you about, start my own small herd. He looked up at her. Maybe convince a certain woman to share it with me if she's willing. Helena's heart swelled. I might be willing. Only might. She moved to sit beside him. I need to know something first. What? That this isn't just about saving me, that you want me for me, not because I needed rescuing. Gideon set down the poker and turned to face her fully. Helena, I'd want you if you were rich as Midas and living in a mansion. I'd want you if you were happy and settled with no troubles at all. The fact that you needed help just meant I could offer it. But what I feel for you has nothing to do with rescue and everything to do with who you are. Your courage, your kindness, the way you see the world. The way you make me laugh, the way you look at me like I'm someone worth knowing. He took her hand. I love you, not the situation, not the drama. You. Tears pricked her eyes. I love you too. Then that's all that matters. She kissed him, and this time neither of them pulled away. The kiss deepened, became urgent. His hands moved to her waist, and she twined her fingers in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. We should stop, he said, though he made no move to let her go. Why? Because we're not married and you deserve better than a cold shack in the rain. I don't care about any of that. She pulled back to look at him. I want this. I want you, not someday, not when circumstances are perfect. Now, Helena. Gideon, I've spent 2 years living for someday. Someday I'll be free. Someday I'll be happy. I'm done with someday. I'm choosing now, and I'm choosing you. She cupped his face in her hands. Make love to me, please. He searched her eyes, looking for doubt or hesitation. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he kissed her again, tender and thorough. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more certain of anything." He stood, pulling her up with him, and spread their now dry bedrolls together on the floor. The fire cast dancing shadows across the small space as they undressed each other slowly, learning the landscape of skin and muscle. Gideon was gentle, patient, taking his time despite the desire written clear on his face. Helena had imagined this moment would be frightening after years of dreading Marcus's touch. But with Gideon, there was no fear, only trust and love and a building heat that made her gasp his name. He moved over her, his green eyes locked on hers, and when they finally joined together, she felt something click into place. This was right. This was home. Afterward they lay tangled together, the rain pattering on the roof. Gideon traced patterns on her bare shoulder, his touch reverent. "I love you," he murmured, "so much. I love you too." She turned to kiss his jaw. "No regrets, only that I didn't meet you sooner." He pulled the blanket over them both. "Sleep now, tomorrow's a long ride." Helena closed her eyes, safe in his arms, and slept deeper than she had in years. They reached Evergreen 3 days later, the mountain town appearing like something from a dream among the towering pines. The air was thin and cool, scented with pine and wood smoke. The town was small but prosperous, serving the ranches and mines in the surrounding mountains. Gideon found them rooms at a modest boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Chen. She was a practical woman who asked few questions, accepting Gideon's story that they were engaged and traveling to their wedding destination. "I'll work mornings at the ranch," Gideon told Helena as they settled in. "I'll ride out at dawn and be back by early afternoon. That gives you the mornings to rest and explore town." "I want to find work too," Helena said. "I won't sit idle." "There's no rush. There's pride," she smiled. "I need to contribute, Gideon. Let me do this," he nodded. "All right. But be careful. We don't know if Dalton's people will track us this far." Helena found work at the town's small dressmaker's shop, owned by a woman named Sarah Miller. The pay was modest but honest, and Helena enjoyed the work, the careful stitching and measuring reminding her of times when her mother had taught her to sew. Life settled into a rhythm. Gideon worked at the Avalanche Ranch, quickly proving his worth with the difficult horses. Helena sewed during the afternoons, and in the evenings, they walked through town or sat in the boarding house parlor, talking and planning their future. Jacob Sterling, the ranch owner, met Helena a week after their arrival. He was a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Gideon tells me you two are planning to marry," he said over dinner at his ranch house. "Yes, sir," Gideon replied, his hand finding Helena's under the table. "Well, I approve. Young man needs a good woman to settle him down." Jacob smiled at Helena. "And from what Sarah Miller tells me, you're a hard worker and skilled with a needle. This town could use more people like you both." "Thank you," Helena said. "We're hoping to build something here. Then let me make you an offer." Jacob leaned back. "I've got a small parcel of land on the north edge of my property. 20 acres, good water, nice stand of timber. I was going to sell it, but I'd rather see it go to good people. You work for me 2 years, Gideon, and I'll sell it to you for half what it's worth. Give you a fair price you can actually afford to pay off." Gideon's eyes widened. "That's generous, sir. It's good business. I need reliable hands and I need neighbors I can trust. You both seem like the type." He extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" "Yes, sir." Gideon shook firmly. "Thank you." As they rode back to town that evening, Helena could barely contain her excitement. 20 acres, Gideon, that's enough for a real start." "It is," he grinned. "We could have horses, a few cattle, build that house. Raise a family," she added softly. He pulled his horse close to hers, leaning over to kiss her. "I like the sound of that." "Then we should probably get married properly," Helena said. "I know we consider ourselves committed, but the law should recognize it too." "Are you proposing to me, Miss Harper?" She laughed. "I suppose I am." "Then I accept." He kissed her again. "How about this Sunday, the church in town, nothing fancy, just us and whatever friends we've made here?" "Perfect." Sunday arrived bright and clear. Helena wore a simple dress that Sarah Miller had helped her make, cream-colored with delicate blue embroidery. Gideon wore his best shirt and a new vest he'd purchased for the occasion. They stood before the minister in the small church, surrounded by Jacob Sterling, Sarah Miller, Mrs. Chen, and a handful of other townspeople they'd come to know. When the minister asked Gideon if he took Helena as his wife, his "I do" rang clear and strong. When Helena gave her vows, her voice shook with emotion but never wavered. They exchanged simple gold bands that Gideon had commissioned from the town's blacksmith, and when the minister pronounced them married, Gideon kissed her with such joy that the small congregation applauded. The reception was held at Jacob Sterling's ranch, a simple affair with food and music. As Helena danced with her new husband under the stars, she thought about how far she'd come. 2 months ago, she'd been trapped in Oklahoma City, facing a future that felt like a prison sentence. Now she was free, married to a man she loved with a future bright with possibility. Happy. Gideon murmured as they swayed to the music. "More than I ever thought possible." "Good, because this is just the beginning." As autumn turned to winter, they settled deeper into their life in Evergreen. Gideon worked hard at the ranch, earning Jacob Sterling's respect and friendship. Helena continued at the dress shop, her skill growing, her reputation spreading. They saved every penny they could, planning for the day they could start building on their 20 acres. One evening in late October, Helena stood at the window of their small room watching the first snow begin to fall. Gideon came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I'm happy. That I have something I need to tell you." He turned her to face him. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." She watched his face carefully. "About 2 months along, I think." Gideon's expression went through several transformations in rapid succession: shock, joy, wonder, and finally, pure happiness. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around. "A baby, we're having a baby, we are," she laughed, dizzy. "Put me down, you fool." He set her down gently, then dropped to his knees, pressing his face against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there. I'm your father, and I already love you more than anything." Helena ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full it ached. "You're going to be a wonderful father. I'm going to try." He stood, cupping her face. "Are you scared?" "A little, but mostly excited. We'll need more space." "Maybe we should ask Jacob if we can start building on that land sooner. We don't have enough saved yet. We'll figure it out." He kissed her forehead. "We always do." Jacob Sterling was more than accommodating. When Gideon explained about the baby, the older man offered to loan them materials and help with construction. Over the winter months, working on weekends and evenings, they built a small but sturdy house on their land. It was simple, just 3 rooms to start, but it was theirs. They moved in on a cold February morning, Helena 6 months pregnant and already showing. As she stood in the empty main room, imagining where furniture would go, Gideon came up behind her. "Welcome home, Mrs. Anderson." She leaned back against him. "It's perfect. It's small. We'll add on as we need to. This is enough for now." Spring came to the mountains, melting the snow and bringing wildflowers. Helena's belly grew round and full. She'd stopped working at the dress shop, spending her days preparing the house for the baby. Gideon was constantly bringing home small treasures: a cradle he'd built, soft blankets Sarah Miller had quilted, a rocking horse carved by one of the ranch hands. One morning in late April, Helena woke to cramps. She lay still for a moment, recognizing labor beginning. "Gideon," she said calmly. "It's time." He was awake instantly, moving with controlled urgency. They'd planned for this. He rode to fetch the midwife while Sarah Miller, who lived close by, came to stay with Helena. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the day and into the night. Gideon paced outside, useless and worried, until finally near dawn he heard a baby's cry. Sarah emerged, smiling. "You have a son, healthy and loud." Gideon rushed inside to find Helena exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. He approached slowly, almost reverently, looking down at the small red face. "He's beautiful," he whispered. "He has your nose," Helena said, laughing weakly. "Poor kid." Gideon sat beside her, wrapping an arm around them both. "What should we call him?" They'd discussed names for months but never decided. Now, looking at his son, Gideon knew. James Anderson. "After your father, he died in the war before I was born. Seemed right to honor him." Helena nodded. "James it is. James Gideon Anderson." The baby squirmed and made small noises. Gideon reached out a finger and James wrapped his tiny hand around it. In that moment, Gideon felt something shift in his chest, an overwhelming love and protectiveness that took his breath away. "I promise I'll take care of you both," he said quietly. "Always." Time passed in the way it does with small children, simultaneously slow and impossibly fast. James grew from a tiny infant to a curious toddler who followed his father everywhere. They added 2 more rooms to the house. Gideon's small herd grew. Helena's dress orders kept coming. When James was 3, Helena announced she was pregnant again. This time, she delivered a daughter they named Grace, a calm baby with Helena's dark hair and Gideon's green eyes. James was fascinated by his sister, constantly wanting to help care for her. Life wasn't always easy. The winters were harsh. Money was sometimes tight, but they faced everything together, and their love only deepened with each challenge overcome. One evening, when James was 5 and Grace was 2, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. The children played in the yard while Helena leaned against Gideon's shoulder. "You ever think about Oklahoma City?" she asked. "Sometimes." "Why?" "I was just remembering how trapped I felt, how certain I was that my life would be nothing but duty and loneliness." She turned to look at him. "And then you rode into town. Best decision I ever made, staying that extra day. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't, if I'd married Marcus?" "I try not to. The thought of you trapped with that man, it makes me angry." He pulled her closer. "But it didn't happen. You're here with me, and that's all that matters. I love you, Gideon Anderson." "I love you too, Helena Anderson." They'd heard nothing from Marcus Dalton after that encounter with the marshal on the trail. Either he'd given up, or he'd found someone else to bully. Helena hoped he'd found peace, though she doubted it. Men like Marcus rarely changed. When James was 7, a stranger rode up to their property. Gideon tensed, his hand moving to the rifle by the door. But the stranger turned out to be Gideon's sister, Catherine, whom he hadn't seen in over a decade. "Katie." Gideon stared in disbelief as the woman dismounted. "Hello, brother." She smiled, older and more weathered than he remembered, but unmistakably his sister. "Took me years to track you down." They embraced, and Helena welcomed her inside. Over dinner, Catherine explained that she'd been widowed 2 years ago and was traveling, trying to find family. She stayed a week, getting to know her niece and nephew, marveling at the life Gideon had built. "You seem happy," she said one evening after the children were in bed. "I am," Gideon said simply, his arm around Helena. "Good. You deserve it." Catherine looked at Helena. Thank you for loving my brother. He always was too stubborn and independent for his own good. He saved my life, Helena said. I'm the one who should be grateful. You saved each other, Catherine corrected. That's how the best love stories work. Before she left, Catherine promised to visit again. She'd found work in Denver and was settling there, close enough to make regular trips. Gideon was grateful. After years of having only Helena and the children, having family again felt like a gift. The years continued to pass. James grew tall and serious, interested in horses like his father. Grace was bright and curious, constantly asking questions about everything. When James was 10 and Grace was 7, Helena gave birth to another son, Thomas, and 2 years later, a daughter named Ruth. Their house had been expanded twice to accommodate the growing family. Gideon and Helena's property prospered. They'd bought additional land from Jacob Sterling, who had become more friend than employer. Gideon's reputation as a horseman spread, and people came from all over Colorado to buy animals he'd trained. Helena ran a small but successful dress shop from their home, teaching Grace to sew as she grew older. One autumn evening, when they'd been married nearly 15 years, Helena found Gideon standing by the corral, watching the sunset. She came up beside him, slipping her hand into his. Thinking deep thoughts, she asked, just grateful. Looking at everything we've built, everyone we love, sometimes I can't believe how lucky I got. We got, she corrected. I'm just as lucky. He turned to her, studying her face in the fading light. She was in her mid-30s now, fine lines at the corners of her eyes, her hands work roughened. To him, she was more beautiful than ever. You ever regret it? He asked. Leaving with me that day? Never, not once, she smiled. You gave me everything I didn't know I needed. You did the same for me. He pulled her close. I was just drifting before you, no purpose, no home. You gave me all of that. They stood there as stars began to appear, comfortable in the silence of long companionship. The children's laughter drifted from the house where James was supervising the younger one's bedtime routine. We should probably go help, Helena said, though neither of them moved. They're fine. James has it handled. He's so much like you, responsible, kind. He's got your strength, though. All our children do. Finally, as full dark fell, they walked back to the house hand in hand. Inside was warm and bright, filled with the sound of their children. James was reading to Ruth while Grace helped Thomas with his letters. It was ordinary and perfect. That night, after the children were all asleep, Helena and Gideon lay in their bed, talking quietly as they often did before sleep. I've been thinking, Helena said, about writing down our story, for the children so they'll always know. What would you say? The truth. That I was trapped and afraid, that a stranger offered me freedom, that we fell in love on the trail, that we built this life together one day at a time. It's a good story. It's our story. She turned to face him, and I wouldn't change a single part of it. Gideon kissed her, soft and lingering. Neither would I. The years continued their steady march. The children grew and thrived. James, at 18, decided to attend veterinary school in Denver, wanting to work with animals like his father but with formal training. Grace, at 15, was already an accomplished seamstress and had dreams of opening her own shop. Thomas, at 8, was obsessed with ranching and spent every moment with his father. Ruth, at 6, was bright and social, the heart of their little family. Jacob Sterling passed away when James was 20, leaving a portion of his ranch to Gideon in his will. It was a final gesture of respect and friendship from a man who had been more father than employer. Gideon wept at the funeral, grateful he'd had the chance to tell Jacob what he meant to him before it was too late. Life had its sorrows and challenges, but through everything, Helena and Gideon remained each other's anchor. They'd grown together rather than apart, their love deepening with time into something strong and unshakable. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Gideon took Helena back to the line shack where they'd first made love. It was still abandoned, still weathered, but to them, it was sacred ground. 20 years, Helena marveled, looking around the small space. Can you believe it? Feels like both forever and no time at all. Gideon pulled her into his arms. Best 20 years of my life. Mine too. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I wonder sometimes what that frightened girl in Oklahoma City would think if she could see me now. She'd be proud. You've become everything you were meant to be. We both have. Helena looked up at him. Thank you for that day, for stopping, for seeing me, for offering me a choice. Thank you for being brave enough to take it. They made love there in that old shack, with the same passion but deeper tenderness than 2 decades ago. Afterward, riding home under the stars, Helena felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. More years passed. James finished veterinary school and opened a practice in Evergreen, marrying a woman named Claire and giving Helena and Gideon their first grandchild. Grace opened her dress shop in town, earning a reputation for quality work. Thomas took over more of the ranch operations as Gideon's body began to slow with age. Ruth showed an aptitude for teaching and went away to school. Helena and Gideon were in their mid-40s when Thomas married and brought his wife to live on the ranch. They built a small house nearby, starting their own family. The ranch was large enough now to support multiple families, and Gideon took pride in knowing his children wouldn't have to leave to find their way. One spring morning, when they'd been married 25 years, Helena and Gideon rode out to the meadow where wildflowers bloomed in profusion. They'd done this every spring since moving to Colorado, a tradition that belonged only to them. They spread a blanket and sat watching clouds drift past mountain peaks. Gideon's hair was streaked with silver now, Helena's showing threads of gray. They were weathered and worn by life, but still strong, still vital. Quarter century, Gideon said, shaking his head. That went fast. It did. Helena leaned against him. Any regrets? You know the answer to that. I like hearing you say it anyway, he smiled. No regrets, not a single one. You're still the best thing that ever happened to me. And you're still the cowboy who saved me. We saved each other, remember? Katie said so. Helena laughed. She was right. She usually is. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren play nearby. James and Claire had brought their 2 boys, and Thomas's wife was pregnant with their first. Life was continuing, expanding, blooming like the flowers around them. I want to grow old with you, Helena said suddenly. I want decades more of this, watching our grandchildren grow, maybe even great-grandchildren. I want to sit on our porch when we're ancient and gray, holding your hand. That's the plan, Gideon assured her. I'm not going anywhere. Promise. I promise. You're stuck with me, Helena Anderson. Good, because I'm not done loving you yet. How much loving are you planning to do? At least another 50 years worth. Gideon pulled her close, kissing her temple. I'll hold you to that. As the sun climbed higher, warming the day, they gathered their family and headed home. The ranch spread before them, buildings and fences and animals that represented years of hard work and dedication. But more than that, it represented love. The choice Helena had made that August morning in Oklahoma City had led to all of this. Family, home, belonging, purpose. That evening, after everyone had gone to their respective homes, Helena and Gideon sat on their porch as the sun set. It was their favorite time of day, these quiet moments when the work was done and they could simply be together. Tell me the story, Gideon said suddenly. What story? Our story, the one you wanted to write down for the children. Helena smiled. You want to hear it, always. So she told it, starting with the gunshot that hadn't been meant for her but changed everything. She spoke of Marcus Dalton and the arrangement she couldn't escape, of seeing a stranger ride into town and feeling something shift. She told of the morning walk when Gideon offered her a choice, of the fear and hope that warred in her chest. She spoke of the journey west, of falling in love on the trail, of building this life together one day at a time. Gideon listened, his hand holding hers, occasionally adding details she'd forgotten or seeing moments from his perspective. When she finished, they sat in silence as stars emerged overhead. "It's a good story," Gideon said finally. "It's a true story, the best kind." They remained there long into the night, watching stars wheel overhead, content in the life they'd made. There would be more challenges ahead, more joys and sorrows to navigate. But they would face it all together as they always had. Because Helena Harper had been trapped in a loveless arrangement, and Gideon Anderson, a stranger cowboy, had offered her escape. And in choosing freedom, they had found each other. They had found home. They had found love. And they lived happily, contentedly, devotedly together for the rest of their days, their story becoming legend in the family, passed down through generations as proof that sometimes taking a chance on a stranger can lead to the greatest adventure of all. Their children and grandchildren would gather on that porch in years to come, listening as Helena told the story one more time. How a girl trapped by obligation met a man drifting without purpose, and together they built something beautiful and lasting. How love doesn't always arrive with warning or convenience, but when it does, you have to be brave enough to reach for it. And every time the story was told, someone would ask if it was really true, if it happened just that way. And Helena and Gideon would smile at each other, that special smile reserved for shared memories and private jokes, and say yes. Every word was true. Every moment was real, because the best love stories aren't the ones that are easy or safe. They're the ones where two people choose each other, again and again, through everything life throws at them. They're the stories where freedom and love become the same thing, where taking a risk leads to coming home. And as Helena and Gideon grew old together, their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, deeper, more essential. They remained each other's best friend, closest confidant, greatest love. They weathered the difficulties of aging with grace and humor, supporting each other through illness and loss, celebrating every triumph together. Their final years were spent exactly as Helena had wished, sitting on that porch, hands clasped, watching the world turn. And when their time came to leave it, they went knowing they had lived fully and loved completely. They left behind children who knew what true partnership looked like, grandchildren who understood that love requires both courage and commitment, and a legacy of choosing each other every single day. The ranch continued, passed down through generations. The story continued, told and retold until it became part of the family's foundation. And somewhere in the mountains of Colorado, in a small cemetery beside a white church, two headstones stand side by side, bearing the names Helena and Gideon Anderson, with a simple inscription, "Together in life, together in eternity." Love was their greatest adventure, and it was true. Every word of it. The end.